So you want to learn Portuguese, but you might be asking, how difficult is Portuguese to learn for an English speaker? What if I told you that learning Portuguese might be easier for an American than it is for someone from England? Well, in this video, I am going to be speaking with a Portuguese expert who happens to be my teacher. She is going to be answering all of the questions that you have about becoming fluent in Portuguese. And she has an amazing online Portuguese masterclass, which I use personally. The link is in the bio below. But without further ado, here she is, Anita. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hola, Dave. And I'm so happy to be here with you as well and super excited.
So glad to have you on here. Anita, I have some questions I have been wanting to ask you about learning Portuguese.
Sure, go ahead. Vamos.
Awesome. Is Portuguese difficult for English speakers?
Yes, Portuguese, especially Portuguese from Portugal, it's a bit challenging. Let's change the word difficult to challenging for English speakers. First of all, we're talking about two different languages in the history, right? English is a Saxon language, so the structure, the basis, the phonetics, it's completely different, right? So that's point number one. And I will speak about my experience here. I've been teaching Portuguese as a second language since 2005. The British community was mainly and firstly, especially in the beginning of my career, my number one community of students. But in the last couple of years, I had the chance to have many American students as well. And I notice a bit of difference here. And I think it has to do with the fact that you also have the British English, right? The pronunciation, the accent, the language, whatever you want to call it. And you have the American English, right? And you have, basically, let's put it this way, very biologically, the sounds you produce with your throat, right? And your mouth, they become a bit different into these two situations, right? And that definitely affects the learning of the language. I find that my American students, they develop the, how can I say this? The capacity of making or reproducing the sounds, like the phonetics of the Portuguese as spoken in Portugal, comes faster than for the British community. Why is that? Because your vowels are a bit lower than what you would have in the British English, okay? As well as with your R's, it's easier for you. You make it in a more similar way to us, especially the soft R. And I'm mentioning this because normally these are the biggest challenges for an English speaker, right? The sound of the R's and the vowels as well. So my American students, they develop or let's put it this way, they do the pronunciation step faster than my British students would do. It takes a bit longer.
How long do you think it takes for an English speaker or an American to become fluent in Portuguese?
Okay, so let's put it this way. I know this is not the answer you want, but it depends on each individual. It depends on the amount of work you put daily in your course or in your lessons, etc. It depends on what you surround yourself with. Because if you are involved in the culture, you're surrounded by locals, it does help in many ways. If you listen to the radio, if you listen to podcasts, if you watch like Portuguese series on Netflix, there are many, many strategies that people use to become fluent after all, right? So it depends, but I would say for you to be, for you to master the pronunciation, the main sounds, and understand very well the structure, you need at least 3 to 4 months. Okay, so that would be, the main thing. If I have to say a number, 3 to 4 months to understand well the phonetics, the pronunciation, and the structure, and then 2 or 3 more months for you to emerge completely in the language and get more confident with it. Okay?
Do you think someone has to live in Portugal to become fluent?
No. It helps though, it helps a lot when you are surrounded by the language. But let me give you again my professional experience point of view. So I have many students who live in Germany, America, South Africa, many different countries, and they don't really live in Portugal, and they are already fluent. Okay, so it has to do again with how much work you put into that, the dedication. I always say that if you want to become fluent in the language, you have to make yourself surrounded by the language. What do I mean with this? Study 10 minutes a day, listen to a podcast. You don't need to be fluent to understand, not to understand, that's not what I mean, to hear to a podcast. You're going to start recognizing words. Listen to Portuguese music. You know, there are many things that can help you in this process. Of course, if you live already in Portugal, that's even better, and it speeds up your process, of course, because there are so many things you can do when you are here. Speak to your neighbors, go to the fruit shop and do your shopping in Portuguese. Go to the beach and listen to Portuguese people speaking. Put your Portuguese radio on. So many things, right? But again, you don't need to live in Portugal to become fluent in the language. Okay, there are many techniques and strategies. For example, my students, we have like a community group where we chat every day, and most of them, I would say 75% of my students, they live somewhere else. You know, they live overseas, they live here in Europe, in other countries as well, but they have a daily practice. You know, if you put a lot of dedication and work into the language, you don't need to live in Portugal to become fluent.
What are some of the most common mistakes you see English speakers making when trying to speak Portuguese?
Okay, so this is a very interesting question. And I'm not making fun of my students or anyone, okay? Because I believe that you are so brave already for learning and trying and doing your best. I had to go through the same process to learn other languages as well. So yeah, so that's it. I was goofy myself. But one of the most common mistakes I see is, for example, for words that end with M. So we have this word to say yes, for example, sim, right? But it ends with an M. You write it with S-I-M. And most of people think that because it ends with an M, you need to read the M, all right? So one of the most common mistakes people do is reading it as sim, and they put their lips together in the end of the word, sim, and it's wrong. Because every time you have a word, and this is a tip for you, every time you have a word that ends with M in Portuguese, well, a vowel, an M in Portuguese, that sound becomes nasal, right? So your nose and your mouth will work together to achieve that sound. So you're going to do something like sim, sim. Okay, for example, well is B-E-M in Portuguese. And you probably heard the locals saying bem, bem, right? We make this strange sound and this movement with our mouth. So we play with our nose at the same time. Bem. We don't say bem, right? We don't read the M, we don't put our lips together. So again, this is one of the most common mistakes I hear people doing.
When getting citizenship in Portugal, you're required to have an A2 level certificate in Portuguese. How would someone get their A2 level certificate for their appointment with SEF, which is the Immigration Services in Portugal, to become a citizen here in Portugal?
So, the official way to get the certificate for the A2 level is by doing the exam in a qualified or an official government school. For example, in Lisbon, the most famous place is Universidade de Letras. You can prepare yourself in other schools as long as they give you the curriculum to study. They teach you accordingly to the curriculum. For example, in my courses, I do that. The grammar you have, the curriculum you have is basically, in the beginner's course, it takes you from 0 to A2 level. And then you can book your exam in a government school I do suggest that you pay attention to that, okay, so you don't get scammed. It has to be an official school from the government. For example, if you are, again, in Lisbon, you have Universidade de Letras, and they do the exams there, all right? So it's very, very good, and then you can see your results online, and they post everything online. Of course, it's a process that requires a bit of time, all right? But again, that's the official way to get your A2 certificate level. There are also some schools that you can do the whole curriculum there, so you can have the lessons there, and then in the exam they are qualified to provide you with the exam. They grade you, okay, and then you get your certificate as well, okay. But again, it always has to be an official and qualified school or certified school for that purpose.
This one can be quite confusing for English speakers. Like Spanish, it's generally perceived that nouns in Portuguese that end in A are feminine and nouns that end in O are masculine. But are there some exceptions, and how do you know when to use them?
Yes, you are so right, Dave. So generally in Portuguese, the words that end with O are masculine and the words that end with A are feminine, right? Easy peasy? No, wait a minute. There will be many exceptions. But the good thing is that you can put that in groups of exceptions. So this is one of the strategies I actually use with my students to make it easier. But let me give you, for example, a tip. Look at the word sofa in Portuguese. The word sofa is sofá. So it ends with an A and an accent, a diacritic, right? The word coffee, café, it also ends with a vowel and a diacritics, right? The word passion fruit, maracujá, okay? So ends with an A and an accent as well. So what happens with these words? They are generally masculine. Ta-da! And that can be your first group of exceptions of words that end with other vowels, not just the A, but there's many with the A, like sofá, maracujá, crachá, the country, Panama as well, Canada as well. So all of these words in Portuguese that end with a vowel and an accent, okay, 99% of the words, okay, they are going to be masculine. So we say o sofá, o maracujá, o café, even the word tea, chá, o chá. So there you go. There are always easy ways to remember some exceptions.
I hear a lot about how difficult the usage of verbs can be in Portuguese. Can you give some examples of how they might be difficult for English speakers?
So the most classic example is verbo to be. For example, in English, you use verbo to be for like so many things, right? In Portuguese, we divide it into two different groups. So two different verbs actually then have different rules. So we have verbo estar and verbo ser. And then you have one that it's more for everything that has to do with who you are in society, like your personal identification, to describe things around you, etc. And then the other one is considered to be a bit more temporary because it's used to describe the conditions of things, of how you feel, transitory location, the weather, etc., etc. So it's very confusing, and it's normally one of the most challenging matters in grammar for English speakers. Another one is when we're talking about our age. For example, for you in English, you would say like I am, and then your age, like I'm 20 years old, I wish. I'm 20 years old, you would say it with using verb to be. In Portuguese, your age is something you have. So we say, eu tenho 20 anos, for example. So it's like I have 20 years old. Okay, so that's normally one of the most common mistakes as well.
When learning Portuguese from Portugal, what do you think about language apps?
Okay, so I have a very specific opinion about that. I'm not a very big fan of learning apps. First of all, because most of them, even though they have like the Portuguese flag, most of them will, it can be tricky because most of them will actually give you Brazilian Portuguese. So you need to be very careful with that. Because it can be tricky. It's nothing against Brazilian Portuguese. It's not that. If your goal is to live in Portugal and to understand Portuguese as spoken in Portugal, and if you were learning it as your second, third, or fourth language, it can be very overwhelming then when you are trying to be understood. Okay? That's the reason why I always say this. All right?
Lastly, Anita, can you tell us why you decided to create your online Portuguese master course?
I think, I'm one of those people who can definitely say that I absolutely love my job. And I don't say this because it's trendy to say, oh, I love my job, I'm so happy. No, I honestly love my job. So I'm going to tell you a story. Well, my story. Back in 2005, when I finished my master's degree in teaching, basically, I was called to start working as a Portuguese teacher for a group of people who were way older than me. And I was only like 24 years old. So I was like young and scared because it's so difficult to teach Portuguese as a second language. And at the time, there was not even any teacher who wanted to teach Portuguese as a second language because it's so difficult, right? Plus, you have to at least be fluent or dominate somehow the grammar of a second language so you can compare it and you can bring, the best possible explanations to your students. Plus, there were no resources back then, right? No resources. There was only boring things like grammar books and no. That totally not my style. So I started to teach Portuguese like back then, like it was basically 18 years ago. It's going to turn 18 years in September now. And I always developed my own style. I always developed my own programs. And then with time, and especially 3 years ago, I started to teach online. So I created an online program where people could have their lessons with me in the computer, etc., Zoom, Skype, etc. But, and I had like loads, hundreds of students, during these 3 years. But I started to be very much frustrated. Why? First of all, because it's so difficult that, to find a schedule that suits everyone, right? And there are people who have really busy lives. There are people who have to be traveling. There are people with children. So there's a lot of things that influence people's schedules, right? And it's very complicated. Second of all, I had to start saying no to some people who wanted to learn from me because I didn't have availability anymore. So I was like, no, I need to do something about this. So I need to be able to find a way to be able to help more people at the same time. Doesn't matter where they are in the world. So basically, my self-paced courses, that's what they are about. So that you can do them whenever you want and from wherever you want. So this was my way to help everyone at the same time as I was sharing my passion for this beautiful language, because it's a beautiful language, even though it's a bit difficult, but it's beautiful. And my passion for Portugal as well, because my courses are not just about language, it's also about the culture of the country, because I always say, and this is my philosophy in life as well, if you want to learn a language, you definitely need to know the people, the costumes, the traditions, all of these things that make the language a living thing. You need to understand all the context so you can be able to speak fluently and to understand fluently as well. So yeah, that was the reason behind it. So I'm blessed to say that I have students all over the globe due to the fact I created these self-paced courses, and I'm able to help so many people at the same time. And to be honest with you, Dave, I never thought that would be possible, even though it's a self-paced course, to be in touch with so many people at the same time and to be there daily for them still, because I am in touch with my students every single day, believe it or not. Well, if you go and see the reviews on my courses, you see them saying that, but yeah, you know what I mean. It's just insane. And I couldn't be happier right now, because I think these self-paced courses are definitely a really good thing to help people who didn't have the availability to sit in front of a computer or to be in a classroom, and they had to drive and they had these, and you know, it's challenging these days. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Anita. It was so nice to speak with you over video chat for the first time. And if you guys are interested in Anita's Portuguese Masterclass, the link will be in the bio below. It's the course that I use. I absolutely love it, and I highly recommend it. She is local here in Portugal and could definitely use your support. My name is Dave in Portugal, and if you're interested in all things Portugal, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, because I'll be posting videos on this channel weekly. We'll see you soon.